The case of Brice Rhodes is one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent history, involving brutal murders, a calculated cover-up, and a dramatic courtroom presence that captured public attention. Rhodes, a rapper from Louisville, Kentucky, was convicted of the 2016 murders of 40-year-old Christopher Jones and teenage brothers Larry Ordway, 14, and Maurice Gordon, 16. He first killed Jones, allegedly believing he was a police informant. Fearing that the brothers, who had witnessed the crime, might talk, he lured them to his home and brutally murdered them before attempting to dispose of their bodies. Rhodes showed no remorse throughout the investigation and trial, frequently displaying erratic and aggressive behavior in court. His chilling lack of empathy and violent outbursts in front of the judge and jury only reinforced his reputation as a ruthless killer. The case remains one of Louisville's most infamous, highlighting the dangers of unchecked violence and intimidation. Brice Rhodes was known in Louisville as an underground rapper with a rising reputation in the local hip-hop scene. However, behind his musician persona, he harbored a violent and unpredictable nature that would eventually lead to a series of brutal crimes. Rhodes had a history of criminal activity, including drug possession, weapons violations, and violent altercations. His aggressive behavior often put him at odds with law enforcement, and his growing rap career was overshadowed by his involvement in illegal activities. By 2016, his criminal tendencies escalated, culminating in a shocking string of murders that horrified the community. Rhodes was no longer just a troubled artist. He became a cold-blooded killer who eliminated those he perceived as threats. His ability to manipulate and intimidate others only added to the fear surrounding him, making his eventual arrest a moment of relief for many who had witnessed his descent into violence. The chain of violent events began on May 4, 2016, when Brice Rhodes fatally shot 40-year-old Christopher Jones in what authorities believe was a calculated attack. While the exact motive remains unclear, it is widely speculated that Rhodes suspected Jones of being a police informant or had an unresolved conflict with him. Jones's murder marked the beginning of a string of horrific crimes that would soon shake the Louisville community to its core. However, it was the gruesome killings of two teenage brothers, Larry Ordway, 14, and Maurice Gordon, 16, that gained the most notoriety. The brothers had unknowingly become witnesses to Jones's murder, a fact that put them in grave danger. Rhodes, fearing that they might cooperate with law enforcement and expose his crime, saw them as a liability. Instead of letting them go, he made the cold and calculated decision to eliminate them in the most brutal way possible. What followed was an act of unimaginable cruelty, one that demonstrated Rhodes' complete lack of empathy and willingness to go to any lengths to silence those he viewed as threats. On May 22, 2016, Rhodes devised a sinister plan to lure the boys into his home under false pretenses. He offered them a sense of trust, knowing full well that they were unaware of the deadly fate that awaited them. Once they were inside, Rhodes and his accomplices turned on them in a sudden and ruthless attack. The boys were outnumbered and defenseless against their assailants, who showed no mercy. The details of their murders remain some of the most horrifying aspects of the case. Rhodes and his associates repeatedly stabbed and beat the brothers, subjecting them to a prolonged and agonizing death. Reports from forensic experts later revealed the extent of their suffering: numerous stab wounds, blunt force trauma, and evidence suggesting that they struggled to fight back. The sheer brutality of the attack painted a clear picture of Rhodes's violent nature. However, killing them wasn't enough for Rhodes. In a desperate effort to cover up his crime and erase any trace of evidence, he took further steps to dispose of their bodies. Rhodes and his accomplices transported the victims' remains to an abandoned house, where they attempted to burn the bodies to destroy forensic evidence. The fire was intended to consume all traces of the crime, but despite their efforts, the bodies were still identifiable when law enforcement discovered them. The horrifying condition of the remains sent shockwaves through the community, with many struggling to comprehend the level of cruelty involved.
I reached on his knees and begged for forgiveness. He tied him up. Tied him up with something. He tied his brother up. He made his brother sit in the bathroom. He put a toboggan over his head, and he put a rag in his mouth. And he stabbed him. We moved Maurice to the side, and we on his brother and he put the tobacco in his head. He put the tobacco in his head. He put the sock in his mouth. I'm like, sorry, stay here too.
In the days following the murders, the disappearance of the two brothers led their worried family members to report them missing.
It looks like they're deceased and they've been burned.
Those are kids. Those are kids. There's some shoe prints right here too.
It didn't take long before investigators uncovered their charred remains, launching a full-scale homicide investigation. Suspicion quickly turned to Rhodes as witnesses began coming forward with key information linking him to the crime. Law enforcement gathered forensic evidence, including DNA samples and witness testimonies, which directly implicated him. The murders of Larry Ordway and Maurice Gordon were not just crimes of violence. They were acts of calculated brutality, carried out by a man who viewed human life as disposable. The killings exposed the terrifying reality of Rhodes's personality. He was a manipulator, an enforcer of fear, and a man who would go to any length to protect himself, even if it meant taking innocent lives. As the investigation progressed, the full extent of his violent tendencies became evident, and it was clear that justice needed to be served. The disappearance of the two brothers prompted a police investigation. Family members reported them missing, and their burned bodies were later discovered in an abandoned house. The crime scene was disturbing, with the victims showing signs of extreme violence. As police began piecing together the evidence, they quickly linked Brice Rhodes to the murders. Witnesses came forward, and forensic evidence tied him to the crime scene. The investigation also revealed that he had confided in others about the killings, further implicating him. Authorities arrested Rhodes shortly after the discovery of the bodies. However, what followed in court would be just as shocking as the crimes themselves. Brice Rhodes' trial was filled with drama, outbursts, and bizarre behavior. Unlike most defendants who try to present themselves in a favorable light, Rhodes made a spectacle of himself in court, frequently lashing out at judges, lawyers, and even the jury. Throughout the trial, he had multiple outbursts, some of which were directed at the judge overseeing his case. He made wild accusations, claiming the legal system was corrupt and that he was being unfairly targeted. He even threatened his own public defenders, making it difficult for them to represent him. One of the most infamous moments came when Rhodes accused the judge of working against him and made threats that led to increased security measures during court proceedings. His erratic behavior made headlines, with many calling him delusional and unhinged.
Nice cheap shot. You a coward. Nice cheap. You a coward. Excuse me.
Job is to do your job, not to worry about me. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
I worry about me. You worry about yourself. You're not trying to give me a fair chance. Effective counsel.
Well, who do you think I should give you as a lawyer?
I'll write the Bar Association and the ACLU. You worry about yourself.
Several witnesses testified against Rhodes, including co-defendants who had been involved in various aspects of the crime. They detailed how Rhodes orchestrated the murders, manipulated others into helping him, and showed no remorse afterward. Forensic evidence, including DNA, blood stains, and security footage, further solidified the prosecution's case. The jury was presented with graphic details of how the victims were killed and the efforts taken to conceal the crimes. The prosecution argued that Rhodes was a cold-blooded killer who eliminated anyone he saw as a threat. The defense attempted to argue mental instability, but the overwhelming evidence made it difficult to sway the jury. In December 2023, a Louisville jury found Brice Rhodes guilty on multiple counts, including 3 counts of murder, tampering with physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse. The jury recommended a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Given the brutality of his crimes and his conduct in court, there was little sympathy for him. The final sentencing was scheduled for March 13, 2024. During the sentencing phase, the families of the victims gave impact statements, describing the immense pain and suffering Rhodes had inflicted on them. They called for the maximum punishment, stating that he deserved to spend the rest of his life in prison. The Brice Rhodes case received significant media attention due to its disturbing nature and Rhodes' behavior in court. True crime enthusiasts followed the case closely, with many YouTube channels and podcasts covering it extensively. Local news stations reported on every stage of the trial, and discussions about the failures of the justice system to prevent violent criminals like Rhodes from committing multiple offences became a major talking point. Brice Rhodes will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars, but the pain and horror he inflicted will never be forgotten. The murders of Christopher Jones, Larry Ordway, and Morris Gordon remain a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind a seemingly ordinary individual. Despite his attempts to manipulate the system and disrupt court proceedings, justice was ultimately served. The families of the victims, while still grieving, can find some solace in knowing that Rhodes will never be able to harm anyone again. For those following true crime cases, the Brice Rhodes case stands as one of the most disturbing in recent history, not only because of the brutal nature of the crimes, but also due to the chilling lack of remorse displayed by the killer.